a Black classic probably begins in Detroit.
You know, honestly, the Cartography Project really feels like a dream. Like, I didn't know anybody at the Kennedy Center, and to know that they were like, oh, you didn't need to know us. We know who you are, and we saw you, and we sought you out, and we see value in your voice and what you do. Like, something that I never really could have dreamed for myself.
Year 2 of Cartography is about trust and family.
All of the questions that came, like, is this a divine sign? And who am I now? I think what is really exciting about what the Kennedy Center is doing with this, of course we're changing the repertoire, we're expanding it so that it's more reflective of who we are and all of the people that are within, you know, these listening spaces. But it's also encouraging other people to come. It's like attracting that.
Being in New Orleans specifically, like, oh, you're actually from a third place, which is movement in and of itself. At the end of the day, I'm like a narrative nomad.
And it's not just about the music, it's where the music comes from.
This idea of Black futures, this idea of identity, and that was something that came up in this first run-through that we did together. Finding your own voice, defining what that means for yourself versus having other people try to do it for you.
Depict it with love.
Please welcome Mason Bynes to the stage.
Hi everyone. I'm just gonna get a little music stand here. Thank you. Great. Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm so thrilled to even be a part of this magnificent collaboration with the Kennedy Center with the Cartography Project. My name's Mason Bynes, I'm one of the composers on this project. I'm from Houston, Texas. Are there any Texans in the room? I always find one or two. Yeah, go Texas, whoop. I'm based in New York City now. A little bit about me as a composer. Growing up, I was deep in gospel music, sang a whole bunch in choir, and that really informed where I come from in terms of like harmony and the way that those harmonies specifically vibrate. So a little bit about what we're going to present today. You know, my favorite part of being a composer is storytelling. I really enjoy being able to capture people, places, and things, but specifically figuring out how to present it in a way where you guys can recognize it or at least find some identity in it. So today I brought some music from a film I scored by an amazing visual artist. Her name is Danielle Dean. She's on the right over here. And she made this incredible film called Himmel, which was just presented at the New York Film Festival, and it was just at the BFI London Film Festival also. So a little bit about the film. Hemel Hempstead is this town that is somewhere within Britain, and Danielle is a mixed-race woman. She's half English and also half Black American. And part of her life, she grew up in Hemel Hempstead, and she also has memories of actually living in Houston, coincidentally. Didn't know that until I got to know her. In this film, the film is kind of like a documentary that's also fused with archival material. So the film is inspired by a different film that's in the archives now called Quartermass 2. Does anybody know Quartermass 2? It's an oldie. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. Quartermass 2 in a nutshell, there are these meteors that strike the earth and then everybody gets possessed by these meteors and they become these zombies. But in Danielle's film, she adds kind of like a different twist. I'm gonna step over this side. In her film, she kind of adds a different twist to it. These are some of the shots. She shot it in 35 millimeter. And instead of having everybody kind of possessed by these meteors, she focuses on a real thing that happened in Hemel Hempstead, which was this big industrial fire. It like blew up, and there was all of this smoke and all of this black goo. And all of the smoke and black goo overcame the city. And she used that as a metaphor to talk about everyone's anti-immigration and kind of like anti-blackness sentiments that were happening at the time. Hence the name Black Goo, which is the music that I'm going to present today. So you can see through some of these pictures here, she puts it in her own point of view. This is actual archival imagery from the explosion that took place in Hemel. And she also just talks about This is the black goo, by the way, too, that happens in the film. And she talks about just kind of the difficulties of being a mixed race woman in that town. And it's kind of like a docu-film, but it's also about her life. So she has actual interviews with her parents and talks with them about, the experience of being mixed race. So in the piece I'm going to show today, towards the end, so Black Goo was commissioned by Art of Elan, and you will hear the last two movements of this piece. The third movement is called Images of Himmel, where you will hear like these fluttering tones and cascading melodies that reflect the anxiousness and the beauty that Danielle experienced when she went back to Himmel to shoot this film back in the summer, especially those difficult conversations that she had with her family. And then the fourth movement is called Black Eden, and it's evocative of Danielle's uncle's garden. There's a scene in the movie where she's in her uncle's garden, and when she was telling me about her uncle's garden, she expressed it as, being a literal Black Eden that flourished with all kinds of greenery and artwork, and he would paint on the fences and everything. So towards the end of that movement, you will hear sliding and sweeping noises that emulate the meteorites that eventually come and strike the earth. And, at the end of that movement, the music dissipates and leaves kind of an abandoned feeling. Danielle talked a lot about how Himmel now has a feeling of emptiness and abandonment after this industrial-like fire. So that's what I have to present today. Thank you for being here.
Hello, it is an honor to be here. My name is Elizabeth Hill. I'm a pianist, and I'm so excited to share this piece with you, which was written by the composer Joe Williams. The piece is called Over Jordan, and it's inspired by the Negro spiritual Deep River.
Please welcome to the stage Jordan Davis. Please welcome to the stage, Nakia Isabel.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so I'm from, my background is in church, and we're very interactive, and I know everything has been music, right? But now we're gonna have some words. I'm doing an original piece called Black Lives Matter Too. So let me say it again. Hello, everybody. Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Shout out to my family and friends that are streaming online. I'm from Seattle, Washington, so this weather isn't much different than what we're experiencing in Seattle. And I'm really grateful to the Kennedy Center and Social Impact for this opportunity. And I'm gonna share this piece, so if you could snap with me like this. Injustice is what I see. You see my blackness, yet life goes beyond what your eyes can see. Black lives, we matter too. You see my skin, yet I'm trying to see you. Ooh, black lives, we matter too. Black lives, we matter, we matter, we matter too. We matter too. We take prayer out of our schools and Christ out of Christmas, yet it's interesting that we rely on the power of prayer when calamity hits. And we say, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, yet it seems as if there is no justice. And freedom is only a joke. We continue to lack unity that allows our streets to choke with red blood, while our marches seem to turn into criticized rallies, and the deception is only magnified by the media. You see the black and the brown die, yet we can't seem to stop talking about protecting the blue. The blue hues of death. Have we become immune to death threats? Many stories untold, yet I wonder if justice will ever be told to live. And since all lives matter, guess what? Black lives matter too. How would you feel if your life was at stake because of another's perception? And when fear pulled the trigger, pop, your family was left shaken to pay a debt of death. See, I heard fear is just false evidence appearing real, yet it's hard to distinguish reality when it's been distorted and covered up with lies. Yet my reality is my skin pigment will always be equated to black. And wherever I go in America, I will be first identified by the color of my skin. You see, I'm educated yet still slated. I'm loved yet still hated, and we can follow protocol yet still lose our lives to the hands of fear. And we can sit in silence, yet that's what they want us to practice. They, the system that was set up for its fellow American citizen to fail, restricting true freedom to prevail. And I'm not playing victim, yet we fall victim when our bodies hit the pavement and we are forced to return to the dust of the earth. So our hands are up, please don't shoot. Check this country's history. It was built under indigenous and foreigners' back, so yes, I'm proud to be black. Because like all lives, black lives matter too. Injustice is what I see. You see my blackness, yet life goes beyond what your eyes can see. Black lives, we matter too. You see my skin, yet I'm trying to see you. Ooh, black lives, we matter too. Black lives, we matter, we matter, we matter too. We matter too.
The stage, Frequency.
How y'all doing? That bad? So like they said, my name is Frequency, and I have two pieces I'm gonna share with you tonight. The second is an original one that I wrote, but in order for you to get the context for it, I have to share this other piece that was written by Zoe Leonard. It's called I Want a President, and it was written in the early, some people know it, there you go, cool. For those of you who don't, this piece was written in the early 90s by an artist named Zoe Leonard, and then I wrote a piece in response to it. So, I Want a President by Zoe Leonard. I want a dyke for president. I want a person with AIDS for president, and I want a fag for vice president, and I want someone with no health insurance. And I want someone who grew up in a place where the earth is so saturated with toxic waste that they didn't have a choice about getting leukemia. I want a president that had an abortion at 16, and I want a candidate who isn't the lesser of two evils, and I want a president who lost their last lover to AIDS, who still sees that in their eyes every time they lay down to rest, who held their lover in their arms and they knew that they were dying. I want a president with no air conditioning, a president who has stood in line at the clinic, at the DMV, at the welfare office, has been unemployed and laid off and sexually harassed and gay bashed and deported. I want someone who has spent the night in the tombs and had a cross burned on their lawn and survived rape. I want someone who has been in love, who respects sex, who makes mistakes and has learned from them. I want a black woman for president. I want someone with bad teeth and an attitude, someone who has eaten that nasty hospital food, someone who cross-dresses and has done drugs and been in therapy. I want someone who has committed civil disobedience. And I want to know why this isn't possible. I want to know why we started learning somewhere down the line that a president is always a clown, always a John and never a hooker, always a boss and never a worker, always a liar, always a thief, and never caught. And so this next piece I wrote in 2020 on the eve of the election that was happening then. There was a campaign called 45 Lies, and it asked poets to pick one lie from the 45th president and write a poem to illustrate or to speak to it. And I found myself struggling with that prompt. And it wasn't until I thought back to that poem which I'd heard in the 2015s that I realized what it was I was trying to say about the notion of presidents. And so this piece is called 1 through 45 have lied. 46 through 100 will be no different. Or, I don't want a dyke for president. Oh, silly humans, how quickly we forget. We who were once ruled by thrones and those who told us they were born to sit upon them. We the descendants of those who overthrew dynasties and decapitated dictators. Who are we, in this moment, to not remember how much we've already overcome? How dare we dream so small? No, I don't want another 4 years of Trump. I don't want any Republican for president. But I don't want any Democrats either. No Democrats, no dykes, no people who've been unemployed. I don't want a black woman in office, not Oprah, Ava, or even Kamala. No immigrants in the Oval. I don't care how many or which drugs they've done. I don't want a president at all. After all, what is a president but a small king? An emperor whose new clothes I cannot see. An agreement we made collectively we can unmake just as easily. I pledge no allegiance to America just because white men defiled it with borders and called the result a country. I do not confuse dying to vote with dying for freedom, even though they meant the same thing at one time in history. I will not beg for a seat at a table whose legs are bent backs and we dine only on scarcity. I want us to dare to dream beyond the dictates of this dystopia, to admit that the ending we feared was coming came long ago and we have simply been living in its shadow. I want us to admit more than this being a failure from the start, to say that America never was great and it never can be, that sometimes the rot is so deep in the root that a pruning does not breed possibility, that any hope for a harvest lies in the fields that we sprouted from being raised and resown entirely. And I want to know why this isn't possible. I want to know why we started learning somewhere down the line that a president is always needed, that a country is always needed, that the police are always needed, that any of this has ever been and will always be needed. And I want to know how after slavery, genocide, colonialism, and all of the ways that they've renamed the taking, how in the world that they convinced us that they know how to run one better than we do. And I know it's sometimes hard to imagine that all of us can truly get free, but I need you to believe that we already are. I need you to believe that we always have been, no matter the master or the monarch, but only if we dared to dream beyond what we could see, only if we understood that reskinning or regendering the beast would never change a rumbling in its belly. See, sometimes I daydream we will live to see the day that a child is born so free, he will hear this poem and wonder what the hell a president even is. And I believe we can do it. And I accept we will beat ourselves in the doing. I accept there will be disagreement, that we will conflict as we unravel our imposed inhumanity, as we realize we have less to learn than to unlearn in order to remember our collective body. And I want to know why this is impossible. I want to know why we started learning somewhere down the line that a president is always needed, that a country is always needed, that the police are always needed, that any of this has ever been and will always be needed. And I want to know how we were asked to write to one lie from one president in one poem when the sum of this country's presidencies is the untruth. 45 lies, yes, but so did 44, and so will 46, and so will our writing if we do not speak to the entirety of this. Oh, silly writers, how quickly we forget. We who were once ruled by thrones and those who told us they were born to sit upon them. We, the descendants of those who overthrew dynasties and decapitated dictators. Who are we in this moment to not remember how much we've already overcome? How dare we write so small? Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage all of our cartography artists, joined by Adrian Loving, curator for Torrance New Links to Black Futures with Cultural DC.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? I am honored to be sitting next to these brilliant artists right here. My name is Adrian Loving, and I'm the guest curator for Torrance New Links to Black Futures, which is happening over at Union Market. It's put on by Cultural DC. And please, I encourage you to go and check out some of the events happening between now and Sunday. But today, we are here to celebrate our wonderful cartography artists. We have Nakia Isabel from Seattle, a poet, brilliant poet. We have Mason Bynes, composer from Houston. We have Jordan Davis, a musician from Detroit. And we have Frequency from New Orleans, who just spit some fire out here.
Also a composer.
Also a composer. Give him a hand, please. So I had some questions, and I think I just threw them out because I was blown away by what I just heard, what I just saw, and really what's speaking to me is what all these pieces have in common. You know, one of the things I think about is some of the work feels sublime, some of it feels very reflective, and it's also, you're all storytellers. You're all brilliant storytellers. And I guess my first question would be, is the story deeply impersonal, or is it a commentary on what's happening now, or something that you're trying to get at? We'll start at the end with Free.
Hello. Y'all can hear me? I think, especially for those of us who come from communities at the intersections of different things, the personal is political. It's never been something that's been able to be separated from me. So a lot of people refer to me as like a social justice poet, and they're like, when are you gonna write personal poems? And I'm like, how do you not hear the personal in every single thing that I wrote? I wouldn't be able to write the pieces that I wrote if I wasn't speaking from a deeply personal place. And then also showing how, again, the personal is never going to be divorced from the larger structures that dictate what is possible or not possible for the personal to be able to manifest. So Yeah, I think, and we were having this conversation earlier with some students about where the work comes from, and I'm one of those folks who believes that we're vessels for stories and truths that need to be told, and the truths will find the people who are willing to tell them, and then our job is to be brave enough to transmute that into something that other people can understand through the medium of art.
Brilliantly said. Thank you. You speak with conviction and personal interest and value. Jordan.
So we're talking about what we performed, or?
Yeah, I think we can start there.
Okay.
I think what I saw was quite a bit of experimentation and using the instrument as a communication device beyond the traditional ways that maybe you use it. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I am 100% a person who performs and writes from experiences, my personal lived experiences, and also the experiences of folks in my community, my friends, my family. And even, the piece that I performed today was written as you saw it performed. And it was written for you all. I decided to entitle it The Offering because this week has been crazy, as is every other week. But pushing through this week, I'm really proud of myself for just making it here today. And I had a plan for what I was going to do and how we were going to perform in that whole thing, but it's also a full moon. So, nothing is going to go according to plan, and that's okay, because that's what the art is about too, especially coming from Detroit and being mentored by so many jazz musicians. Like, our experiences are the art. And so that's what I was bringing to the table today.
And Jordan's also going to be on a panel on a film about Detroit techno, where we talk about the cinematic compositions. And your work felt quite cinematic as well, too.
Thank you.
Mason, is it tough to get the musicians to play your pieces and really have them understand like the emotion and the feeling? Like, how much of your own personal coaxing and teaching has to go into them to create what you envision?
That's a good question. I'd say in the past, I tried to make the music that I'm writing when it's in draft mode as tangible as possible, as quickly as possible. So for this score for Black Goo, when I first made the score, I sent over like a MIDI kind of realization, which is the electronic music that plays it, but I also just vocalized it. I shared with them all the voice memos that were a part of the draft process, and this stuff I was literally talking to myself about, but then also actually representing the music by singing it. And I feel that when I'm able to embody it that way, it becomes a little bit more tangible. A more literal example, when I was in grad school, my master's thesis was the intersections of music and food, because there's a lot of overlap. Masterworks versus recipes, or cookbooks versus masterworks, instrumentation versus ingredients. And Rossini actually was a huge cook, and he had a macaroni and cheese recipe. So I made this acoustic guitar piece. It was super fun, but I literally brought the mac and cheese for everybody to try as buy-in. So
love through your stomach.
Yeah, so just figuring out how else can I tell this story or communicate and figure out how we're both recognizing each other when playing this piece.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to go. Okay. Nakia. How does place factor into your writing? As we listen to you recite your poetry, does where you live, where you come from, affect what you're talking about, or is it more conceptual, or research writing? Like, what are the factors that come into play of you creating?
Yeah, for sure. I think my faith. It's really important to me. I think that's the thing that keeps me grounded. And then I think just experiences. I was a teacher for 2 years in high school, and now I currently work as a restorative practices coordinator at a middle school. And, thank you. And so I think that just kind of what all the artists, composers, musicians, all the vessels said here today is literally my art comes from my experience. And I think one of the things I'm trying to do now is be more vulnerable, because I feel like in my life there has been walls up to protect myself. But I think watching what we go through as people, what my family has been through. My cousin was shot, I shared this earlier, my cousin was shot and killed by the police in 2017 in Seattle. And that was personal for me. I think we hear about Trayvon Martin's and the list goes on and on, so I don't want to start naming people, but it became personal to me. And then how do I counterattack the narrative that's being thrown out about my cousin, Charlene Allows? I wanted to show that she was a human with 3 of her 4 children present when this incident happened, and she was pregnant. And so how do we counterattack the narrative that she has mental health issues, she's crazy, listening to the audio over and over again? I probably shouldn't have done that, but really trying to figure out what happened from them knocking on her door, being invited into being a death sentence. And so I think I think art makes things palatable. And so experiencing it, trying to process it, and still being in process. And I think art gives us an opportunity to express freely. And so learning how to do that, and I think for me, that's a continual process.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you. So, you know, we're running into some interesting times coming up, and we're all having to think and process how we feel about how we live, what we're going to do the next year, and how, as artists, how your work is going to respond to that. Part of this Cartography Project is imagining futures, imagining Black futures. As 3 Black artists, is the idea of Blackness or Black living or Black future, does that weigh heavily on your creative process? Because you have to balance things that you love and you want to do, and then also incorporating this sort of like potential agenda or an aesthetic, or how might you talk about balancing those things in your work? You can think about that for a second.
So for my piece, so my piece is entitled, as of right now, Black to the Land. And it's actually an exploration and also just a reclamation of Black and brown kids having a relationship with nature and experiencing joy and peace and rest in nature, and not so much fear and violence. But also taking time to recognize that in order to envision what type of future you want to have, it's so important to look at the past and the types of relationships our ancestors had with the land, and what corrupted those relationships with the land and brought us to where we are now. And what I love about what's happening in the city of Detroit right now is that within the last decade or so, it has become legal now to urban farm in the city of Detroit, which was not a thing that you could do before. So like these community gardens didn't really exist, and I've seen so many young kids go to these gardens. It's like they're after-school programs now, getting to spend time planting seeds and harvesting their own food and just playing in the dirt, like not on an iPhone, you know, just being outside and having a relationship with the earth. And as opposed to trying to carry the weight into the future, my piece is a wish. It's a wish. And I'm really just like, I also just became an auntie. So experiencing, you know, life through my young nephew's eyes is also really inspiring the piece, which is also why I want it to be a wish and I want it to be hopeful. There's so much in our lived experiences that are already painful enough, especially when we're talking about the Black lived experience. And what I don't see and what I don't hear is enough Black children dreaming and wishing. So that's what I'm trying to bring to my piece.
Yeah, that's great. Free, your piece is quite reflective and quite deeply researched and something to really chew on. I mean, I would want to go back and read that piece again. Would you read her piece and get new ideas from it? Are those pieces published where someone could access them and take the knowledge from it, or is it only for performance?
Both. So there's videos online of the performance. I also have a book coming out next spring through Button Poetry that piece and other pieces will be in. And just to your question about like the futures, right? I think a lot about time and how we're taught time as a linear thing, but it's really not, right? Like the past, the present is an accumulation of the past, and the future is an accumulation of presence. And so there's a way that, not to be all that like after school special, like the future is now, but also, really, like we are in real time actively creating the conditions for what the future could be by how we are living right now. And so one of the things I like about the Cartography Project is even just the naming of Black futures as plural, because there are so many possibilities for it based on the collective decisions that we make now and the direction that we choose to move forward. And similar to what you were saying, like a lot of my piece is actually on the surface rooted in the past, because it's looking at, the piece is tentatively called The United States of Grief, and it's looking at the different relationships between Black people across the diaspora and how we've moved through different moments of grief as a way to actually sustain ourselves in the present and make sure that there is a future. But none of that is possible unless we're able to sort through the accumulation or the archive of the past and speak truthfully to what it is and is what's going on. And so for me, in the piece that I shared today, and I feel like in all of my pieces, it's just concerned with telling the truth as it's relevant right now and as it's been told in the past, and also making sure that the untruths that have been told are named explicitly as untruths, because at the end of the day, if history is a story, like we're all living stories in different times. We're all narrators in real time if we really sit and take autonomy in the way that we have control over the present and the future. And so I always want my work to reflect not just the reality of what is, but the reality of what could be and the level of ownership that we have in that. And so I think a lot about Black futures and the ability to imagine forward. And so I have a piece where I say, I've come to believe that all Black parents are Afrofuturists, right? Like if you are creating children under these conditions, there's a part of you that's hopeful that your children will be able to live beyond what it is that we've made. And then I think about the conditions that Black people across the world, from the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism, have overcome. And the amount of imagination, can y'all imagine like what it took to imagine yourself out of colonialism? Out of enslavement, state-sponsored slavery? Like these are not small acts of, wishing. Like imagination is something that can and is often actualized, and that is what gives us our present reality. There's nothing, that's what that piece is really trying to get at, is that there is nothing here that is inherent. Everything is a continuous agreement that we make with each other, and part of the work of the systems that oppress us is to keep us from knowing how much we can actually impact the reality that we're in now and in the future.
Thank you. I'll follow that up by saying the storytelling workshop is Sunday at Songbird that Free will be leading. So please, more of this on Sunday at noon, right? Okay. 4 o'clock. Okay, great, 4 o'clock. Mason, you want to talk a little bit about that? Do you have a question? I mean, did you want to answer that question, or do you have some more thoughts about futurism in your work?
Yeah, I'd say both. I'll talk a little bit about the piece that's in response to that question. When I was figuring out how to answer this question, like Jordan was saying, you have to kind of look back at your past to understand like where you're going. And for me, Black Futures is just, we're there. We're there, we're free, we're chill, we're happy, we're fine, right? But I also think about how all of us are together like that in terms of timeline, generations. So I started thinking about roller rink culture, like Black roller rink culture in Houston. My parents and like the fits they still have in their closets, and my aunt's like weird jean jacket that she has that she used to whip out and go and roller skate at Funplex. The way that Destiny's Child was also roller skating at Funplex for Beyonce's 21st birthday party in Houston all the way back then. Like if you think of a roller rink and all the types of music that is there in terms of timeline, it's a thing that brings all generations together under a disco ball. And we're free. If you even think about the concept of when you went to your first roller rink party, maybe it was your friend's birthday party, or if you were a church kid, it was Vacation Bible School like it was for me. And you start off on the side of the roller rink because you don't have firm footing, right? But then when you hear your song, you do kind of let go. And you do kind of ask yourself, what if I did skate to the center and I joined my mom who's like doing backflips over there? She's been doing it forever, right? Or what if I grabbed my dad's hand, who's also in the center of that roller rink, to have that trust and have that community? Like, I just think it's just a really beautiful representation of us spinning literally into the future, like beyond space, beyond time, and continuously.
That's great. I want to go roller skating now. Thank you for that. Nakia?
Yeah, it's funny, being up here, you just get lost in being present. So I'm enjoying everything you all are saying. In terms of the piece that I'm creating, I really have been inspired by how Seattle's been gentrified. And I am thinking about ways for us to think about home. And no matter, I was saying this earlier, home is whatever we make it. So whether I'm in the inner city, the outskirts, how do I get us to think about being comfortable where we are, despite our displacement, the resilience, the hope, the joy in that, because it's not always a joyful process to grow up in a space and to go back and see it look very different than it was when you went there. So I think for me, I'm getting inspired by community, by experiences, and thinking about how do I end on hope. So again, going back to the past, talking about that a little bit, but ending with this sense of hope. Home is a sense of belonging, knowing that you're loved, you're seen, and no matter what your experience is as a human, everybody wants to be loved, everybody wants to be acknowledged, seen, and heard, and that's what I want to bring to the project.
Thank you. That was a great way to wrap us up. I think this is about all the time that we have, but I want to thank you for being a great audience, and I want you to follow these artists. Go on the Cartography section of the Kennedy Center website and read more about them, follow their music. There's also quite a few other artists that were not here today, but they're all going places. They're going to be doing some big things, so please follow them. Again, I'm Adrian Loving. Thank you to the Kennedy Center for having us, and I think we'll wrap it here.
Thank you for joining us at Millennium Stage. For information about upcoming shows, please check the Kennedy Center